In this lecture, we're going to use the callback context to check the current action of the input controller. Behind the scenes, Unity adds a variable called action to the context parameter of our input event handlers. They're called started, performed, and canceled. Only one of these actions can be active at a time. The started action gets applied when a player presses a key or binding for the first time. The performed action gets applied when Unity has verified that the button has been pressed. Sometimes, players may accidentally press a button lightly. We don't want to perform an action until it's been confirmed by Unity that a binding has been pressed. Lastly, the canceled action gets applied when players release their fingers off a binding or input. So, why do we care about the action? On our player, we have an animator controller for applying walking and running animations. These animations are controlled via a parameter called speed. We need to toggle the values between 0 and 1. 0 represents idle, and 1 represents running. Before updating the speed parameter, we must check the input controller for a key press. If a key is being pressed, we can set the speed parameter to 1. Otherwise, we'll leave it at 0. In your editor, open the movement component. Let's keep track of the action by creating a variable. At the top of the class, define a public Boolean variable called isMoving. Its initial value will be false. Initially, players will not be moving. You may be wondering, why is this a public variable? Keep in mind, the movement component is being applied to enemies too. We may need to manipulate this variable from a state. Therefore, this information should be public. At the same time, we don't want this variable to be manipulated via the Unity editor. Let's apply the non-serialized attribute to this variable. Next, scroll to the handleMove method. The current action of the input will always be passed along with the context parameter. Let's check the context parameter for a performed or canceled action. Add a conditional statement with the following condition: context.performed. If this condition evaluates to true, this means the key binding is being pressed. Let's set the isMoving variable to true. Let's create another condition for changing this variable to false. The condition will be the following: context.canceled. If this condition evaluates to true, this means the key binding has been released. Let's set the isMoving variable to false. By keeping track of this information, we'll be able to toggle the speed parameter in the controller. In the next lecture, let's begin updating the speed.